Okay, what we're doing right now is on page 15 of your factoring packet. So you might want to turn to page 15 to do your homework. I'm jumping in with about the hardest kind of factoring there is, so actually in the next few days we might be doing some stuff that's easier. But I thought I'd go in and teach like the whole thing and then go backwards a little bit. If you can do this, you'll be able to do the pages before this, most of it. And I'll just teach you as we go. Alright, the first thing I want to do is see if there's anything in common. There's nothing in common, no numbers, no ends in common. So then, if you have what is called a quadratic, where you have these three terms, you draw two parentheses if you can't take out anything in common. And then you've got to decide what goes in those parentheses to factor. So what you want to do is factor the front, 3 times 1, factor the back, maybe 4 times 5. I don't know yet. It might be 5 times 4 or 10 times 2. And then you're going to check with these two smiles, the smiley face. Here's a smile, and here's a smile. A lot of times you'll get where you can do this in your head. This number is 15, and this number is 4. And I can't make a 15 and a 4 add up to 7 at all. So then I'm going to switch the 5 and the 4. So I'm going to make this a 5 and this a 4. And so here's what I do usually. So I have a 3 and a 1. I tried a 5 and a 4. I knew that wouldn't work because that gave me, that one, I'm sorry. I must have had 4 and 5. So let me start over. Alright, so 3 and a 1. I must have had a 4 and a 5. So try that big smile on the outside and a little smile on the inside. This is 15 and this is 4, and so I can't get a 7 out of that. So then I decided to switch the 4 and the 5 and make it a 5 and a 4 and try a big smile and a little smile again. This smile gives me a 12, and this, I'm saying this word smile, this smile gives me a 5, and I can get a 7 in the middle out of that. And so this sign right here tells you that your signs have to be different because if it ends in a negative, you have to have different signs, and I'll explain that as we go. Now see, I want a positive 7, and I have to have different signs. So to make it a positive, I need a positive 12 and a negative 5. Alright, so now I've made my decision. These go in the front of the parentheses with whatever letter you have, which right now is N. 3 N and 1 N. These go in the back of the parentheses in order of which you read them, 5 and 4. And you want this one right here to create a positive 12. So I want this big smile to have a positive, and I want this little inside part right here to be a negative. And so really your answer is 3n minus 5 times n plus 4. You'll get where you do a lot of it in your head, but we're just going to go slowly right now. By the way, you've really just found the zeros. This has 2 zeros, and I'll show you that we've actually found the 2 zeros, but right now we're just trying to factor. Now let's check it. So if I check it, see if I got it right. I'm going to do FOIL, 3n squared. This is plus 20n minus 5n. I'm sorry, that wasn't 20. Let me start over. Alright, so this is 3n squared. This is plus 12n. This is minus 5n. And this is minus 20. So that gives me 3n squared. This gives me a positive 7n minus 20. So I factored it. All right, number 2. 7a squared plus 48a plus 36. And at first this might seem a little tedious and confusing, but you'll learn to go do, like I said, do it in your head. None of the ones I'm going to do at first have anything in common, but I always check and see if there's anything in common. But there's nothing in common with all 3 of them. And so I'm going to think of I factor the front and factor the back. The factors of the front are 7 and 1. The factors of the back, first I'm going to try 6 and 6. I could try 9 and 4 and 4 and 9 and 36 and 1 and 12 and 3. We have a lot of options, but this narrows it down real quickly. That gives me a 7 times 6 is 42. This gives me a 1 times 6 is 6, and I can get 48 out of that in the middle. So factor the front, factor the back, and then mess around with it until you get the middle. Well, I stumbled on it the first time. Oh, let's talk about your signs. The plus sign at the back means that your signs are going to be a negative and a negative, or a positive and a positive, because either one of those, a negative times a negative, a positive times a positive, both give you a positive. And since this is positive, it means that it's just all positive. All right, so I take these numbers, 7 and 1, with the A. So I have 7A and 1A. These go in the back, 6 and 6, and my signs are all plus. We're going to check this one too, but you don't have to check every one. But this is factored correctly, and eventually that will tell me where my zeros are. That's 7A squared. That's 42A. This one is 6A and 36. So I have 7A squared plus 48A plus 36. All right, let's go to number 3. All right, so you may even want to pause it and try number 3 yourself. 5V squared minus 41V minus 36, or you can just watch me work this one. Factor the front, I'm going to try 5 and 1. Factor the back, I'll try 6 and 6 again. So let's see what we can do with that. That gives me a 30, and that gives me a 6. Trying for the middle number 41. Well, that didn't work. You might can see right away that it doesn't help any to switch the 6 and the 6. And so I'm going to go to 9 and 4. So now I'm going to try 9 and 4. That gives me a 20, and that gives me a 9. I cannot get 41 out of 20 and 9. So now I'm going to switch the 9 and the 4 to a 4 and a 9. I'm just going to switch them around. That gives me 45, so I'll do it a little cleaner. So factor the front, 5 and 1, 36, we tried stuff, so now I'm going to go to 4 and 9. That's 45 and 4. I can get a 41 out of that. The back sign tells me that the signs are going to be different. So one of these is positive and one of these is negative. I decided to do it like positive and negative because I have a negative 41. And if I add those, I get a negative 41. These go in the front of the parentheses, 5V and 1V. These go in the back in order, 4 and 9. This one needs to create the negative, this one needs to create the negative 45. And so this 9 is going to be negative, and the 4 is going to be positive. And then you could check it. But now it's factored. All right, so let's see. All right, number 4. I'm trying to get a longer page, just a minute. Okay. All right, so number 4. Number 4 is 3b squared plus 22b minus 16. I did check for something in common, but there's nothing in common. Factor the front, factor the back. 3 and 1. I'm going to try 4 and 4. Big smile, little smile. This is 12, and this is 4. And a 12 and a 4 can't give me a 22, so that's not it. It didn't help any to switch the 4 and the 4 because they get the same thing. So I'm going to try 2 and 8. Oh, that's going to work. The 3 times 8 is 24, and the 1 times 2 is 2. A 24 and 2 can create a 22 in the middle. So I'm going to have a 3b in one front, and the 1b in the other front of the parentheses. These go in the back, a 2 and an 8. This means the signs are different. One of them is positive and one of them is negative. Can you see the 24 has got to be positive and the 2 has to be negative to make that happen? And so this is creating the 24, so the 8 is positive. This one has to be negative, and so this is creating that, and that's going to be negative. All right, number 5. 5n squared minus 49n plus 72. All right, something I've talked about at the end, let's talk about at the beginning. A positive, it ends in a positive. That means I have a negative times a negative or a positive times a positive. And since this is negative, I know they're both negative. If it ends in a minus, I know it's going to be a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive. All right, so let's go to number 5. Factor the front, 5 and 1, and 72. Let's try 8 and 9. All right, that gives me 45 and 8. 45 and 8 is not going to give me a 49. So I'm going to try to switch it before I try any other combination. I usually stick with the numbers I've tried first. So now I'm going to try 9 and 8. And yeah, as you do more of this, you get better at picking, and you really can do some of this in your head. 5 times 8 is 40. 1 times 9 is 9, and so that works. All right, what goes in the front of the parentheses? A 5n and a 1n. What goes in the back of the parentheses is a 9 and an 8. The signs are either plus, plus, or minus, minus. This tells me they're minus, minus. Number 6. And at any time, it might be good to pause it and try yourself. All right, nothing in common, but I'm going to always check it. 6, I usually try 3 and 2 first. Factor the front, factor the back. 12, I'll try 3 and 4. I know they've got to have different signs eventually in the parentheses. Big smile's 12, little smile is 6. So a 12 and a 6 isn't going to give me this number in the middle, which isn't understood to be 1x. All right, so I don't think it's going to do any good to switch the 4 and the 3. So I'm going to switch the 4 and the 3. And that gives me 9. Oh, and 8. So that did work. A 9 minus an 8 would give me a 1. The bigger number to get a negative right here needs to be negative. All right, so I'm going to have a 3x in the front and a 2x in the front of this one. In the back, I'm going to have a 4 and a 3. And this outside 3 has got to be a negative 9 and a positive 8. Number 7. Number 7 is 4y squared plus 29y plus 30. Ends in a positive. That means a negative times a negative or a positive times a positive. Since this is positive, it's all positive. So I already know my signs are going to be plus. All right, so let's play around with it and see what gets us a 29 in the middle. Well, let's try 2 and 2 for the 4. Factor the front and factor the back, and then worry about the middle later. 30, we might try like 3 and 10, or 6 and 5 or something. All right, this gives me a 6. In fact, let me write it down here like I've been doing. Okay, so 2 and 2, I think I said 3 and 10. Factor the front, factor the back. All right, this gives me 20, and this gives me 6. I can't get a 29 out of that. It doesn't do any good to switch the 10 and the 3 if you try it because of these two 2's in the front. So I may have to change from the 2's, but let's try 5 and 6. This gives me 12, and this gives me 10. So that didn't work. So 15 and 2, 2 and 15. This gives me a 30, and that gives me a 4. I still can't get 29. So it's unusual, but sometimes I've got to do a 4 and a 1. And I don't think I need it with the 15. So a 4 and a 1, do some guess and check. Like I say, you get a lot better at this. A 4 and a 1. Let's go back to 5 and 6. That's 24, and this is 5. Oh, I can get a 29 out of that. And it's all positive, 29. So in the front you have 4y, and in the front of the other one you have 1y. This is 5 and 6, and that's your factorization. Number 8 is interesting. I actually tried every combination I could think of, and I could not get this one to factor. However, I want to show you something about it. It won't factor, but it doesn't mean it doesn't have answers. It just means we're not going to be able to find our answers by factoring. So I'm going to go to Desmos and show you what I'm talking about. So let's back up to number 7. Number 7 was 4y squared plus 29y, so backing up to the one we just did, plus 30. Oops, sorry, I didn't type that in right. 29y plus 30. Okay. Oh, I probably have to put in an x instead of the y so you can see what I'm doing. So let me do that again. Don't know what happened if I use another variable. Let's call it 4x squared. I'm putting in an x instead of a y so I can type it in. Okay, so I'm going to say 4x squared plus 29x. I'm just typing an x instead of a y so you can see it. Plus 30. Okay, do you see these zeros? One of them's -6, and one of them is 1.25, which is the same thing as -5/4. Now if we type this one in, that we're working on right now, number 8, 4x squared minus 16x minus 15. Notice that it has zeros, but they're really weird numbers. Do you see that? And so we're not going to be able to factor it, and so there'll come another day that I'll show you how to find that. Sometimes we call it prime, or you can just write cannot factor for right now. Alright, and so you can just leave that one alone. You can try it, and let me know, but I don't think you're going to be able to factor it. And another day I'm going to give you a way to know before you even start if you can factor it so that you don't waste your time. Alright, factor the front, factor the back on number 9. This is 7 and 1, 18. Let's try 3 and 6. Just guess and check. I don't think that's going to work. Like I said, you'll get better at this. That's 42. It's going to be really hard to get a 15 out of that. So I'm going to switch it to 6 and 3. I might need 9 and 2 or something else. 6 and 3. Oh, this is going to work. That's 21, and this is 6. I can get a 15 out of that if it's a positive 21 and a negative 6. So here's my factors. So I have 7 in, and 1 in goes in the front. These are in the back, 6 and 3. This one needs to be positive 21 to get a positive here, and the inside one needs to be negative. And so that one's factored. All right, now moving on to number 10. Number 10 is 20a to the 4th b minus 20a cubed b plus 5a squared b. Now, I notice as I'm writing that, there's a lot in common here. Like they have a 5 in them. They all have at least an a squared and a b. So if I factor or divide out 5, that leaves me a 4. If I take out a squared out of a to the 4th, that leaves me a squared. And I took out that b. It's right here. Now I have minus. I took out the 5, so it leaves me a 4. I took out a squared, so it leaves me an a. And I took out the b, so that's gone. And In the back, I took out the 5. 5 out of 5 leaves me 1. I took out the a squared and the b. And so I have this. And now we're learning that we can factor these. So let's copy down the first part. That's in the front. And now I'm going to do 2 parentheses. And I'm going to try to factor this the way that we just learned. So I'm going to go 2 and 2, 1 and 1. I factored the front and I factored the back. This means the signs are the same. This means they're both negative. Alright, that gives me a 2 and that gives me a 2. So this is going to be, so that gives me a 4 in the middle. So this goes in the front, 2a and 2a. These are our back numbers right here, 1 and 1. And so now that one's completely factored. Let's go to number 11. Remember, you can pause it at any time and try it yourself. 16r cubed minus 80r squared plus 100r. Alright, that has something in common. They all have an r, and they all have at least 4 in them. If I take out the 4 of 16, it gives me 4. Take out the r, it gives me r squared. 4 out of 80 gives me 20. And r out of r squared gives me r. 4 out of 100 gives me 25. So here's what I have in the front. And now this is a quadratic that I think I can factor. Alright, so let's factor the front. 4 and 1 maybe, or 2 and 2, I don't know yet. 25, I'm going to do 5 and 5. That gives me 20, and that gives me 5. I can't get a 20 in the middle. So I'm going to change something. I'm going to change this to a 2 and a 2. So let me start over. Factor the front. Most of y'all probably for the 4 would have tried a 2 and 2 anyway. For the 25 is a 5 and 5. That gives you 10 and 10, which can give me 20. The signs are the same. They're both negative. These are our front numbers, 2r and 2r. These are our back numbers, 5 and 5. Number 12. 2x cubed y plus 6x squared y squared plus 4xy cubed. Alright, they have a 2 in common. They all have at least one x and one y. I take out a 2, it leaves me just a 1. An x, it leaves me x squared, and I took out the y. Take out the 2, leaves me a 3. Take out an x, leaves me an x. Take out a y, leaves me a y. Take out a 2, leaves me a 2. Took out the x, so it's gone. And took out a y, so I have y squared. It's the first time we've done one of these together. Quadratic, I'm going to draw 2 parentheses. Alright, so the front is 1 and 1. The back is probably 1 and 2. That gives me a 2 when you multiply, and that gives me a 1. I can get a 3 in the middle. The signs are the same. This means they're both positive. But look what I have in the front is an x. So this gives me a 1x, and this gives me a 1x. And in the back, I don't just have a number, I have 2y squared. So it gives me 1y and 2y. Now if we, and so that's done. If we check that, we would get x squared. In the middle, we would have 2 with the xy and a 1 with the xy. That's where that 3xy comes from. And at the end, we'd have 2y squared. We can talk about it a lot more in class. We can keep doing these. Number 13. 3a cubed b plus 15a squared b squared plus 18ab cubed. They all have a 3 in them. They all have an a in them. And they all have a b in them. So if I take out a 3, leaves me a 1. Take out an a, leaves me an a squared. I took out the b. 15 divided by 3 is 5. An a out of an a squared is an a. A b out of a b squared is b. 18 divided by 3 is 6. Took out the a, took out 1b. So that's one of my factors. Now I'm going to factor this quadratic. I think the 1 is going to be, it's got to be 1 and a 1. The 6, let's try 2 and 3. That gives me a 3. That gives me a 2. I can get a 5. Signs are all plus. These go in the front. These are A's, 1A and 1A. He goes in the back, and they have B's in them, 2B and 3B. That's number 13.